What is it with game journalists and Wolfenstein II and easy mode? I get that Wolfenstein II fills up your murder fantasy of killing Nazis, especially when they're relevant in this day and age. But if you're the sort of person who cannot distinguish between someone who merely disagrees with you on the internet and actual Nazis with giant robots that bite people's limbs off, then this is reason 1488 in why game journalists are absolutely freaking nuts. In the past couple of months, there are 3 articles that talk about pretty much the same thing, how Wolfenstein 2 is better played on easy mode because it fuels my murder fantasy. And I swear, despite all of these articles being published in what people would call respectable gaming outlets, they all read like poorly written diaries from a middle schooler that somehow becomes a best-selling young adult novel. Let me show you the oldest one, for example.
Wolfenstein 2 gets so much better when you play on easy mode.
This article basically talks about how Wolfenstein 2 is better to play on easy mode because the enemies are a lot easier to kill and therefore it fuels up my murder fantasy on killing Nazis in alternative history America, which is exactly like killing Nazis in modern America, especially those horrible Nazis on the internet, listening to heavy metal. Now before we get into the article, I think it's good if we talk about the actual game first. Wolfenstein 2 is a game that I didn't touch at release because of its horrendous PC launch, and it's also inferior compared to the original. My money is frankly better spent elsewhere. But these articles make me want to play Wolfenstein 2 just so that I can know how hard the game really is. So I did. I played this game in Bring It On difficulty, not because I'm a filthy casual. I am a filthy casual, but I actually wanted to play this game in I Am Deaf Incarnate. I played I Am Deaf Incarnate for at least a couple of chapters before it stomped me and kicked my ass. Which is great, by the way. That's exactly what I want from my Wolfenstein game. Just like how I beat you last time in the same difficulty, and that took me 12 to 14 hours. However, I have a video to make about game journalists dropping the game from Bring Them On to Can I Play Daddy? So I decided to try Bring Them On for the sake of comparison. With the Bring Them On difficulty, it took me about 8.5 hours to beat the game. 8.5 hours. I've spent more value investment in PUBG. Is the game challenging in Bring Them On? Well, not really. I died quite a few times and some sections get frustrating. Unlike Doom, where you can easily gain health by glory killing enemies, if your health is like 20 and 0 armor in the game and you're stuck in the corner being surrounded by like 3 heavies and a dozen of enemies, you might as well kamikaze yourself to death. Thankfully, the game allows you to quick save at any moment, which makes a lot of hairy sections insultingly easy once you figured out where the health packs are and you quick save when it's max before you come back to action. The enemies get really easy to take down once you figured out that shooting on the hip does next to 0 in accuracy reduction, so you might as well aim and spray for the heads or dual wield if that's your sort of thing. The heavies are easy to take down once you dual wield an automated shotgun and spray to death, and even if you can't do that, you can just let them melee you and shoot their backs, which contains gasoline tanks and can easily kill them in a couple of shots. There are also huge robots in the game, but you can also take them down by looting the big laser gun and just fire it at its head, or in some cases, literally not take them down. I am very sure that a good chunk of the game doesn't force you to kill these robots, and actually it doesn't force you to kill anyone at all. In some cases you can run past the enemies and go straight to the objective. At least Doom had the courtesy to close the door. So in conclusion, if you want to get this game and gain pure satisfaction out of it, bump the difficulty up. Bring Them On difficulty is about as hard as spraying a mosquito, and with that difficulty, the game feels unchallenging, unsatisfying, and shorter than Shinji Ikari's dick. Keep in mind that this is coming from me, whose gaming skills would make DSP cringe to death. If I say that the game is unchallenging, every average gamer can take it down without any issues. Hell, I'm very sure you can beat the campaign in less than 7 hours on the Bring Them On difficulty. Still, at least I can understand why some game journalists take the easy difficulty route. Sometimes they don't really have too much time to review the video games at all, but I don't really see them justifying it in public. At least keep it on the backstage or something so that no one can make fun of you, or at least give us good reasons for it. Putting this in public would only increase the chance of some schmuck on the internet to make fun of you. Like me.
Even on its default difficulty setting, it's an intensely unforgiving first-person shooter. In my hands and under those conditions, BJ Blazkowicz was a frantic idiot who could barely make it out of a firefight with a couple of lowly Nazi troopers. Hell, even evil Nazi dogs tear him to shreds. My BJ was a shambling slapstick sketch of a man, unable to navigate the spaces he's sent to infiltrate or, on that note, infiltrate anything without immediately being spotted and filled with lead.
And by the default difficulty setting, I'm assuming he's referring to Bring Them On. And again, Bring Them On is insultingly easy and it makes finishing the game frustratingly short. I genuinely want to ask whether or not there are many more content left. If it's left for the DLC, Bethesda, you can go screw yourself.
The problem here is that I just didn't care to struggle through the fights. The constant failure and confusion got in the way of what the game does exceedingly well, telling its story, and so I did something I hardly ever do. I lowered the difficulty.
You know, after playing this game, I know exactly how the fans of Blade Runner feel about Blade Runner 2049. Wolfenstein II is an unnecessary sequel because the story that it tells is beyond forgettable. I stopped taking the game seriously when Blazkowicz's dad unironically says, "Strain the clear." The rest of the story is pretty much a retread of the first one, and it doesn't do a good job of showing the difference between the two. It doesn't have the same impact as the first one, but I guess it does for game journalists because in current year 2017, the Nazis are taking over the world and all they want is a game where they can grab a Nazi and rip them apart. And yet somehow, despite game developers giving them exactly a game that they wanted, they just couldn't be bothered to play it. For all those talk about punching Nazis in the real world and how that will contribute into making the society a better place, they sure as hell sound oddly unenthusiastic when being given a game that can do more than just punching a Nazi. Wouldn't they have their bloods boiling up and fire it straight to the hardest difficulty to kick some Nazi ass? This proves without a shadow of a doubt that a lot of these activists are cowards. And if they're put in a real war situation, they're gonna cry in the corner and expect Lord Jesus to turn the world's difficulty down. And they're atheists.
Now seemingly impervious to bullets and able to kill a Nazi with little more than a nasty glance in their direction, I had truly become the Terror Billy, and the game suddenly became so much better for it, unlike the latest entry in Wolfenstein's sister series Doom, which I was happily to masochistically crawl through on higher difficulty settings.
I would call BS on that. So you're willing to masochistically get through Doom in the highest difficulty, but not this game? If Wolfenstein 2 on Bring Them On is like spraying a mosquito, Doom in Ultraviolence is like spraying a mosquito with a hazmat suit. The biggest difference is you get health points by glory killing enemies, while in Wolfenstein you have to scavenge through health points and hope that you get some of them before the dogs bite your ass. And that is assuming that you're talking about Ultraviolence. If you're willing to masochistically go through Doom in the Nightmare difficulty, where every imp fireball would get pretty much half of your health and there are like hundreds of them in the area, but you can't go through Wolfenstein's Bring Them On difficulty, that's like saying, oh, sure, I will jump from one tall building into another, risking the bones on my feet if it's full moon and the planets are aligned. But not into a pool of water. That's my biggest enemy. I'm only 5'12", and the swimming pool is for people who are 6 foot, for God's sake. The author then says that the reason for this is that the story is so great, with great cinematography, great writing, brilliant smart commentary, highlighted by great lines such as "straighten the queer." Again, if you're interested in Wolfenstein, The New Order is much better, much more impactful, a hell of a lot cheaper, definitely one of my favorite games as of late. Wolfenstein 2 is just a cheap, half-assed sequel that only retreads the original, with a significantly shorter campaign that adds nothing new on the table. The only good reason for you to play this game is if the game is set for sale at $5, which isn't the case right now, so it can suck my brown dick.
There's never a right way to play any game, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who love methodically working through the new Colossus death traps and barely scrapping by as Nazis in exosuits bear down on them with giant laser cannons. But Wolfenstein 2 makes a good case for taking the low road. Narratively and emotionally, turning BJ into an unstoppable killing machine feels as right as it ever could in a game. The out-of-combat scenes outshines the battles by such a wide margin that lowering that barrier makes the whole experience so much more streamlined and pleasant. It's such a ridiculous thing to have to say, but there's no shame in playing on easy mode if it helps you enjoy something more, and that very well could be the case with the new Colossus. Just get out there and tear up some Nazis.
So the game journalist played the game because he found the story more engaging and the combat is only good if Blazkowicz is a power fantasy character. There's nothing wrong with this argument at all. You can play the game however you want. It's just that speaking as someone who is horrendous at video games, Wolfenstein 2's Bring Them On is pretty freaking easy. But hey, at least this journalist just has a different playstyle. The next one is even more embarrassing.
It might be time to rethink difficulty menus.
While the last article is more about playstyle and preference, this article is about the game's difficulty menu insulting the journalist, and he's not okay with that. But you know what I'm perfectly okay with? New patrons! Huge thanks to Yoshu for the pledge on Patreon, you are fantastic. And also, huge thanks to Patreon for reverting the changes that you made to the payment system that you announced last week or last couple of days. So if you're a patron of mine who pulled off thanks to Patreon's brand new payment system that charges you more, well, they pulled it off. They took that new system and burned it off to a fire. So now you can support me. Or not, it's up to you.
This is the difficulty menu for Wolfenstein II: The New Colossus. In a callback to the original games which showed up in the new order as well, the menu's telling you only babies play the games on easy. It's funny on the surface, but also an insidious kind of peer pressure. Don't listen to it.
Well, I didn't. I played the game in Bring Them On anyway, and I went through the game just fine. So, how are you doing?
At first I did, which is why I spent half of Wolfenstein 2 completely miserable. Playing on Bring 'em On, the game's normal difficulty, I spent hours dying to Nazis hidden in the far corners of my TV screen, or down ones who I'd previously unloaded on but apparently didn't register the kill shot. In the middle of these frenzied game over fests, I wanted to throw my PS4 out the window. Then, I'd inevitably get a cutscene at a new location, like Roswell, and instantly be transfixed again.
PS4. Look, if you don't have a good PC to play this game and you only have a PS4, I'm not judging, that's fine. However, you're a game journalist. You're writing for a video game site. They should provide you with a decent rig, or a gaming laptop at least. I played this game and recorded this game and made this entire video and edited this entire video in my Asus ROG Strix GL553VD, Intel Core i7-7700HQ, NVIDIA GTX 1050 4GB, 16GB of DDR4 RAM, good enough to run pretty much a lot of newer games in medium settings, 720p and 60fps because, 1050 is still very entry level. I guess the reason why you die so much in this game is because you play it with a controller, and this game is a very fast-paced first-person shooter, so a controller is not recommended at all. Get a PC and a mouse and keyboard. Actually, speaking of mouse, if you want a good mouse recommendation, I just bought a Logitech G402 Hyperion Fury. It's a pretty freaking amazing gaming mouse compared to my already awesome Logitech G300S, and I bought it on sale for like $30. With 5 customizable keys that you can remount to any button and many configurable sensitivities and DPIs, this mouse will do any of your gaming duties better than any mouse in the market. Check them out at the link below. There isn't a link. This isn't a Linus Tech Tips video.
In a broader sense, the way difficulty has come to define various people's preferred playstyles feel counterproductive. There should be more ways to slice a game than just damage sliders. In Wolfenstein 2, difficulty affects how quickly things die, including you. Sometimes it also changes how many enemies there are and when they're placed. Story beats and how environments are constructed remains the same though, rather than offer different modes that emphasize different ways of playing the game, like focusing on stealth or limited combat exploration. The settings are just knob egging you to crank it up to 11.
That is actually a good point. Game difficulties as of late only relies on modifying how much damage enemies do to the player and players do to the enemy, how much enemies spawn, etc. And a lot of game developers don't even bother to balance the game properly when they are put in a higher difficulty. They just modify the damage sliders. While in some cases the game does improve the enemy AI to be more aggressive, they won't do them to your partner AI. So in Resident Evil 5, for example, regardless of what difficulty you picked, you're stuck with an absolute moron throughout the game, unless you're playing co-op. This would be a discussion for another time though.
As more AAA games focus on open world design, the idea of needing to earn the exploration parts by completing familiar repetitive tasks like go kill some dude or collect a bunch of random stuff feels almost criminal. People spend years of their lives working on different parts in a game that most people, even the ones who buy it, will probably never see, especially if it's towards the end. Being beholden to archaic difficulty sliders just put up more barriers.
Yeah, well, video games are not for everybody, and I honestly don't care if people cannot see more of the game just because they're not skilled at it. If you really care about that, why not just watch Let's Plays?
We've seen games trying thinking outside the box in the past. Mass Effect 3 offered a narrative-first mode that streamlined combat and exploration to let players focus on dialogue trees and character relationships. Deus Ex Mankind Divided did something similar. While the difficulty options didn't dramatically change the game, they were geared towards what the player was after: story, the old-school Deus Ex feel, etc., rather than a hierarchy of perceived gameplay purity.
Okay, now this is also another fair point. What Deus Ex did is, instead of mocking the players for playing the game on easy, they just simply go, hey, this is for someone who enjoys the story. This is for someone who enjoys gameplay. This is for someone who wants a definitive Deus Ex. I do think that game developers should definitely put more emphasis in describing what the difficulty of the game represents, instead of just a standard and lazy, very easy, medium, hard, etc. However, that's not the main focus. The main focus in this entire thing is the reason for you to ask all of that. Sure, a part of the reason is to make the purpose for each option clearer, but we all know that the main reason for this is because you are personally mocked by it. You are mocked by a game for playing it in the easiest difficulty, and you want other video game developers to not mock you or alienate you for it because you feel guilty and your feelings are hurt. Can I ask you a question? You can have thousands and thousands and thousands of people to email you in how much of a noob you are and you need to get good. You can have games to insult you and compare you to a baby. So tell me, what is really stopping you from playing the easiest difficulty other than your own guilt? You know what I say? I say screw your guilt, play this game in the easiest difficulty, hell, download a trainer, then throw the biggest middle finger to the trolls on the internet telling you to get good, because the only way for these trolls to stop you playing the game in the easiest difficulty is if they magically teleport into your house and slam your head against the wall until you stop breathing. But since trolls do not have those powers, all they can do is scream helplessly. But if you can't handle trolls screaming helplessly on the internet telling you to get good, you can also just, I don't know, get good. Especially since you're a game journalist, you know, you actually need to get good so that you can give accurate reportings in video games. Oh, wait a second. Even if you're actually good at video games, I doubt that you're going to give accurate reportings in anything, so never mind what I said, carry on.